You're listening to GWP Live Severe Weather Coverage. It is still Monday, May 18th, 2026, and it is now 4:30 p.m. Central Daylight Time, and we are here to update you on some hazardous weather moving across the country, including us here in the local region in the state of Missouri.
Absolutely, a number of different severe weather cycles moving their way across the region. So, certainly, you will have to stay tuned for that along the course of this broadcast. As always, you will have the opportunity, if you have any questions about what we're talking about, to call in. The number to do that is 417-448-0819. With any of those burning questions, again, that number is 417-448-0819. So, Jake, how are things looking across the region right now?
Yeah, so right now, at least here in the state of Missouri, I'm happy to report that we don't have any ongoing severe thunderstorm warnings or watches. So that, of course, is the good news here. We do have a tornado watch across northwestern Missouri, just on the north side of Kansas City. In fact, this tornado watch that has been issued, it goes until 10 p.m. And so that's something that we're watching. We've also got this one here across Kansas and Nebraska. This watch right here is a PDS tornado watch. PDS stands for particularly dangerous situation. And so it's kind of the higher threshold, if you want to call it that, for severe weather. And only 2% of tornado watches and severe thunderstorm watches get the designation of a PDS watch. So only 1 in 50 watches are designated as a PDS watch. And that's exactly what we have across northeastern Kansas. And so particularly dangerous situation, that's when we have a significant risk for severe weather, including the threat for tornadoes. And that's what we have across southeastern Nebraska and northeastern Kansas for this afternoon.
You heard that right, folks. Only 1 in 50 of these severe storms have this PDS tag, this particularly dangerous storm. So, whenever we see one of these, it is a very serious matter. No joke. Again, capable of a great deal of damage. Again, possible that it causes injuries, death, things like that. So, if you are in one of these areas, as we mentioned, southeast Kansas, now seeing one of these particular warnings with a PDS tag attached to it. You want to pay attention very closely to the developing weather conditions in your region. Jake?
Yeah, so a PDS watch has been issued across northeastern Kansas and southeastern Nebraska until 8 p.m. So that is where we start to see that higher risk for severe weather, including tornadoes. We could be looking at long track tornadoes, and tornadoes could be upwards of EF3 strength. And so that's the higher end of that scale. It goes from a 0 all the way up to a 5. Of course, a 2. Is what we had here last year in Moundville, and then an EF1 is what we saw in the Nevada area, just for comparison. And then an EF5 was the Joplin tornado. That was the scale that the Joplin tornado was given 15 years ago on May 22nd, 2011. And so that's kind of the scale. So again, 5 is the most destructive. In fact, we don't see a whole lot of those. We had our first EF5 tornado that was last year in North Dakota, first one that we've had in over a decade. And so EF5 tornadoes are very rare, considering that we did go about 12 to 13 years, somewhere in that range, without seeing an EF5. So EF5s are very rare and dangerous. Zeros are kind of at the bottom, and then 2 and a 3, that's what we're going to be looking at the risk of today. That's kind of in that moderate range. But again, EF4s and 5s can't be ruled out as well. That's pretty unlikely for today. But again, still some very dangerous severe weather there. So that's one threat that we're dealing with right now across Kansas, Nebraska, and northwestern Missouri. Those storms will eventually move into our viewing area late tonight, and the tornado threat will still be there, but overall, the tornado threat is going to be a lot lower. And we're mainly going to be looking at the risk of flooding, which we've already seen some flooding across the state of Missouri. Flood watches are in effect. We have what was issued, or what is called a moderate flood risk that was issued across central and western Missouri. And so that's a 3 out of 4 on the flood prediction, or excuse me, the Weather Prediction Center's flood outlook. So a 3 out of 4 moderate risk was issued for us in the state of Missouri. So that's going to be our main threat, but also some straight line damaging winds with the storms that we're expecting later tonight.
Absolutely. So, a number of recent developments on that, and some great information on the sort of tornadoes that we're looking at, the possibilities that we're looking at here, just to really put into perspective some of the different ratings on those tornadoes. As you mentioned, again, one of the highest, one of the most severe ones that we see, again, one of the ones you see most seldom, but what the Joplin tornado was, again, caused a great deal of damage, really destroyed the city here in Joplin, Missouri. So, again, we don't see those very often. Likely not what we're looking at tonight. Not quite that severe. We're probably not looking at fours and fives, different things like that. Won't foreclose the possibility entirely, but certainly not likely that we'll see ones to that degree. And just to give kind of a bit of perspective, as we mentioned a few moments ago, what we saw not long ago here in our local listening area, right here in the city of Nevada, was an EF1, and that even caused some damage. We saw a number of local homes and businesses that took damage. Things come to mind: the Chinese Chef restaurant, the Oaks Inn, a couple of different places that took a great deal of damage, even from an EF1 tornado. We saw more the little town of Moundville, not far just outside of Nevada, really devastated by just an EF2 tornado. So, again, difficult to imagine by the time you get up to the top of that scale. And a question on that, Jake. A few moments ago, we were talking about some of these severe storms and how some of them, only 1 in 50 of them, have this PDS tag, this particularly dangerous storm tag attached to them. So, in the context of the most severe of tornadoes, these ES5s, these EF5 tornadoes, that is, that we see so seldom. Again, so one not too long ago, again, notably across our region, the Joplin tornado just caused a great deal of damage. So ones like that, Jake, is it pretty much a given that those things will have a PDS tag attached? You know, we didn't really specify that. Was there one attached, say, in the case of the Joplin tornado, or was it not quite that severe, or is these sorts of tags used in those cases? What are we looking at here?
Well, I have to say, I actually did not follow tornadoes as much 15 years ago when the Joplin tornado took place, so I don't necessarily quite recall. In fact, I'm not even 100% sure if that PDS designation existed 15 years ago, but I do know that, from what we do nowadays, I guess the same system that we use now, it's been updated and modernized a lot in the last 10 years. But if we were to go off of today's scale, and if there was another Joplin tornado today, let's say somewhere else, then there would definitely be a PDS tag on that particular storm. It would be, well, they actually don't call it a PDS warning. The PDS is for a watch. And so that's kind of an important distinction, is the PDS is mainly just for a watch, particularly dangerous situation, is what the PDS stands for with the watches. Now, the warnings would be considered a tornado emergency, is what they would issue if another Joplin tornado were to develop. And that would only be if we had confirmation that something like that was actually happening. Sometimes we don't necessarily know that until after the fact. And of course, the something that we need to know about the enhanced Viguti scale, which is that EF scale that we were talking about. It's based on the destruction left behind, not necessarily the wind speeds that are observed during the storm itself. And so it is very well possible that you can have an EF5 tornado be rated as an EF0 simply because there was no, any structures or anything to survey the damage. And so sometimes that does happen. And then you can also have, I guess on the flip side of that, it is possible for, an EF5 tornado to be rated based on damage when there are no winds to actually confirm that that actually happened. And so it's happened many times where a tornado has been rated a lot less than the wind speeds that were actually observed simply because there was no damage to rate off of the scale. So the scale is entirely based on damage and is not based on winds that are recorded during the storm. And so the damage is what determines what sort of wind speeds we likely had had during the storm. And here is the scale that we were talking about here. Again, it goes from EF0, which is on the lowest end, EF5, which is the most severe, the most violent. And so EF0 is winds of 65 to 85 miles per hour. We're talking about minor damage, branches snapped, gutters and shingles lost, those types of things. And then an EF1, which again is the same strength of the tornado that moved through Nevada last year on April 2nd, that was an EF1. That's winds of 86 to 110 miles per hour. We're talking about moderate damage. Roof is sometimes peeled off, like we saw with the China Chef building there. Mobile homes are overturned, and then windows are broken. That's very similar to the damage that we saw here in Nevada. So that's why that was rated an EF1 tornado. EF2 is 111 to 135 mile per hour winds. And so this is similar to the Moundville tornado that we had, or it was the rating of the Moundville tornado last April 2nd as well. Significant damage, torn off well-built home or torn off roofs. Well-built homes can also see damage. Large trees can be uprooted. We saw quite a bit of that around Missouri State Highway 43. Mobile homes can be destroyed, as well as weak structures similar to that gas station that was nearly completely wiped off its foundation. So then we get to EF3s, and this is really where we start getting into some serious damage. 136 to 165 miles per hour. Severe damage. Entire stories of homes are destroyed. Severe structural damage to large buildings, and trains can be overturned as well at that rating. And then an EF4 is 166 to 200 miles per hour. Devastating damage, well-constructed homes leveled, vehicles thrown, weak structures blown some distances. And then the most severe is again EF5s, which are very, very rare. And we're talking about winds greater than 200 miles per hour. And so, even a 300 mile per hour tornado would be an EF5. It's just anything that's greater than 200. And so strong frame houses swept clean off foundations, concrete structures are heavily damaged, cars can be thrown several miles as well. And so this is really EF5s, really sometimes even EF4s can just totally level a complete neighborhood.
Absolutely, Jake. A few great distinctions to make on that front. As we've previously mentioned, as our regular listeners, viewers here on GWP, the smartest of folks out there will know well, as we mentioned routinely here in our severe weather coverage, that these tornadoes are rated on the degree of damage that they cause. So you mentioned before, Jake, that it's somewhat counterintuitive, or it can be. One might assume, if they didn't otherwise know, that these tornadoes are rated not on the damage they cause, but on say, the speed of the winds or different things, on the storm itself, rather than the after effects of it. So certainly a great thing worth knowing on that front. That's why you can see some disparities from different things. You can say, oh, this storm, this tornado was comparable to this one, but they received different ratings. Oh, because maybe the structures, maybe there were less sturdy structures in this city. Maybe there were more trailer parks in this city, so it caused more damage, something like that. So a possibility that often isn't accounted for, that is important to consider when sort of analyzing these different tornadoes and their ratings. It's important to remember that those are based on the damage that these tornadoes caused, is of course measured after the effect, after the tornadoes have actually happened. Now, in terms of the different ratings on those, as you mentioned, we were talking about just moments ago on the ratings, of course. What we saw not long ago with those, again, here in Nevada, again, capable of causing a decent amount of damage, but certainly not. So there's even some question about Jay. It'd be interesting to hear kind of your thoughts on this. And we've talked about this recently, of course, the sort of infamous Joplin tornado we've already talked about during this broadcast. Now, when that happened, of course, the city was really devastated by it, wasn't prepared for it. Now that it's happened, they had a chance to rebuild things somewhat and build things in a way that's more sturdy. Perhaps they'd be more prepared for that. So because these tornadoes are rated on the EF scale, where it's based on the damages after the fact, a tornado of a similar scale, perhaps just because they're more prepared, because they have sturdier structures, again, more of these shelters in place and different things, may receive a slightly different rating. Is that the case?
Yeah, it is certainly possible for that to happen. In fact, we have just a few examples of tornadoes that were not rated EF5s simply because there wasn't significant damage reported, even though there was wind speeds that exceeded 200 miles per hour. One example was a tornado in El Reno in Oklahoma back in 2013. There was estimated wind speeds between 291 and 336 miles per hour, but that was done through mobile Doppler radar, so it was not actually confirmed to be an EF5 tornado. And then we also had in 1999 during the Bridge Creek Moore tornado in Oklahoma, there was a wind gust of 321 miles per hour that was recorded by Doppler radar. This is actually the highest confirmed wind gust that has ever been recorded on planet Earth. Right here in the state of Oklahoma in the United States, 321 miles per hour. So that well exceeds the EF5 threshold of 200 miles per hour. And so, also in a more recent tornado in Greenfield, Iowa, there was a tornado that had wind speeds of 309 to 318 miles per hour. But again, there was no damage associated when the winds were over 300 miles per hour. And so that never became an EF5 rating for that reason.
Oh, right. Just sort of amazing to see. And you would think it would be rating on more of sort of while the storms are going on, kind of the severity of it. How high were those wind gusts? Again, this, as you mentioned, Jake, the highest on record, 321 miles per hour in the state of Oklahoma here in the United States. Just very difficult to imagine winds of that speed. Again, I perhaps certainly don't follow the weather cycles all that closely. Wind speeds certainly all the time. The wind speeds in particular is one thing I do maybe watch a little bit more as a sailor. I enjoy sailing, and that's sort of difficult to imagine. Certainly, high winds to a degree are good for sailing. You want to get a decent amount of wind in your sails. Obviously, you don't want to be out on the lake during a tornado. Certainly not with 321 a mile per hour winds. So again, just Oklahoma has had a ton of that. Again, many will know. Again, sort of the films Twister and the sequel Twister is sort of based on that severe weather, those tornadoes that happen in that region where those are particularly prone to happening. I was in Oklahoma not long ago. Luckily, didn't see any of this severe weather, and that is just really mind-boggling to imagine. Again, as a sailor, high wind speeds are decent to an extent, as long as you're not in a storm, anything crazy like that. But 321 miles per hour, that might be a bit much. Jake?
Yeah, that certainly is. And so that's something that you wouldn't want to be caught out in. And so, but the idea here is that we're trying to communicate is that it's important to understand that these EF ratings do not come during the tornado itself. You can't necessarily say, oh, well, we measured a wind speed of over 200 miles per hour. We must have had an EF5 tornado. It's based on the damage that the survey teams from the National Weather Service find after the fact. And so you'll never know the actual rating of a tornado until days afterwards. And so it's important to understand that, yes, we're talking about the risk of EF3 tornadoes today across Kansas, but we're not necessarily going to know if that happened until after the fact. And so that's something that we're dealing with. Also, just wanted to point out that I noticed that we just had a new tornado watch issued across Texas and Oklahoma. So the area that's being affected by these storms has expanded. This goes until midnight. So a new area where we're starting to see some severe storms. So that's just one of the different types of hazardous weather that we're dealing with across the country. We've got the flooding, as we mentioned, the tornadoes ongoing across Kansas, Nebraska. Now some severe storms are firing up along the dry line across Oklahoma and Kansas. We've got some wind advisories here across Oklahoma and Kansas, so a little bit breezy out there. So that's something else that we're dealing with here. The flooding has now also extended into Illinois and Indiana as well. So that's something else that we're dealing with. So we've got that. And then here across the Great Lakes, this is not the only area where we're dealing with severe weather, but we've also had some ongoing severe storms this afternoon across Michigan. These started in Chicago. Well, actually, they started here in Missouri this morning, and then they made their way towards Chicago. We actually had a 79 mile per hour wind gust that was reported there at the Midwest Speedway Airport on the southeast side of Chicago. 11,000 customers were without power because of some of those stronger hurricane force gusts that were reported from that storm in Chicago. That was around 11:15 earlier this morning. Those storms have now started to make their way into the Detroit area, and so we'll have to continue to watch that very closely as well. That's not all on hazardous weather. We've also got some heat advisories across the Northeast as well. So this goes into we've got Boston included under this, through New York into Philadelphia. Some areas we could be looking at temperatures upwards of around 95 to close to 100 degrees, which is very unusual for this time of year across the Northeast. So that is, of course, a concern. Heat advisories for today. The worst of the heat is going to be tomorrow, where the U.S. Capitol could be looking at temperatures almost up to 100 degrees. So that's some more hazardous weather. And then the same storm system that's producing all of the severe weather is going to bring a cold front in later this week, and by the end of the week we'll have high temperatures in the 50s and 60s across the same area in which we're seeing temperatures near 100 degrees today. And so a pretty big change is expected across those areas. On the backside of this cold front, we also are dealing with some snow across Wyoming. We even had some blizzard conditions that were reported in the higher elevations across that area. We've got some freeze alerts here, frost and freeze alerts. So if you have any plants outdoors, that's going to be a really big concern here. Pretty large area where we're dealing with temperatures potentially below freezing. So that's another threat that we're dealing with. We're also dealing with some ongoing wildfires right now across the state of California, across central California under a red flag warning for some fires. Southern California, we've seen a few fires that have started to develop across that region. So that's something that we're going to be watching for. And then we've also had additional threat for fires across New Mexico, Texas, and Oklahoma. And then on top of that, if that wasn't already enough, we even have an ongoing dust storm in Amarillo, Texas, where we have major airport delays. We have an airport weather warning that was issued for that area. And then we have a dust advisory for the area. We're dealing with visibility less than a mile because of blowing dust. And then in Canyon, Texas, just to the south of Amarillo, we have a dust storm warning where a dust channel was located over Canyon moving northeast at 10 miles per hour, and there was reportedly dangerous, life-threatening travel, near zero visibility, and winds in excess of 50 miles per hour. There was also a wildfire that was reported just to the west of Amarillo as well. So we have ongoing dangerous wildfires spreading at a rapid rate, causing evacuations, and then we have an ongoing dust storm in the panhandle of Texas causing near zero visibility. And that's all a part of the same storm system that's bringing in our severe and flood threat across the Central Plains and Great Lakes and the blizzard conditions across the Rocky Mountains. All of this is from the same storm system.
Absolutely, some great developments on that, Jake. As you mentioned, a dust storm going on across Amarillo, Texas. So I've never seen a dust storm personally, but they say, again, as one might imagine, those visibility conditions greatly reduced. Again, can't say that I've been in a dust storm, certainly almost old enough to have seen the Dust Bowl again. So a number of different things, but certainly visibility impacted by dust storms. Again, things like that, a number of other things going on across the region. There on the West Coast, as you mentioned, some wildfires still going on, which again is not new. Certainly the West Coast there in California, especially prone to wildfires with some of the Santa Ana winds that we see across that region. We don't really see anywhere else. So those certainly, those combined with the very high temperatures, certainly, and the dry conditions make for it, especially prone conditions for wildfires, different things like that. And those conditions, of course, naturally, they spread very rapidly whenever these things happened. And any of those out there who have been listening to GWP for a very long time will know that we've covered these things in the past. Of course, past year, 2024, 25, kind of around that time, some wildfires going on across the region. It was rumored at the time, there were images circulating around, some that turned out to be AI generated images. Hollywood sign burning, well, it's actually still there. It didn't actually burn. So again, Certainly, and a number of different things. That was one of the things that wasn't damaged. A number of homes, sort of in the Palisades area, famously that were lost, that were just burned to the ground as a result of these wildfires. Now, to a degree, with the Santa Ana winds, different things like this, the very high temperatures, very dry conditions, those things all contribute to this again, making it very risky. Again, the likelihood of these fires to get started, and again, in that region, anyone could do something as simple as drop a cigarette, drop a match, and it would spread just very rapidly, just because of all of those conditions combined. And there was some question about that. Of course, some of the forests in the areas where some of these fires were, and there was some question about this around the region. Some again water that had been drained into the ocean that was supposed to go to the forest. So a number of different pieces of speculation. Of course, naturally, there are a number of risks already at play, but perhaps a number of different preventative things not abundantly clear. Jake, what else do you know about the wildfires and different things like that, particularly the ones that we're seeing now and the ones we've seen in the past few years that are on the West Coast?
Yeah, well, we know that quite a few of the recent fires, at least here in New Mexico and Texas, the ones that we're looking at right now, a lot of those have been started by dry lightning. And so that has been one of the biggest concerns. The environment is so dry that when these thunderstorms develop, the moisture is not actually reaching the ground. And then so you have this lightning that is hitting the dry vegetation, and then it starts a wildfire that can spread very rapidly. And so that's part of one of the causes of what we've had of some of the recent fires. All right, we do have to go into a brief intermission, but we will return here at the top of the hour. Don't go anywhere. This is GWP Live's ongoing severe weather coverage. All right, and welcome back. It is now the top of the hour. This is GWP Live's severe weather coverage. It is Monday, May 18th, 2026. As we mentioned, it is now 5 p.m. here at the top of the hour, and we are tracking some ongoing severe and hazardous weather here across the country. We have been focusing in on the state of Missouri and the flood threat that we're dealing with right now, as well as that severe weather threat that we're expecting later this evening. But we've also been talking about some other hazardous weather across the country as well, including a dust storm that is moving through the Amarillo area and some ongoing fires across that region as well. And then we've also just kind of briefly been touching on some other things, including some damage that we had in Chicago from some storms. Those have now moved into the Detroit area as well, and then some extreme heat across the Northeast along the I-95 corridor as well, and then a blizzard that was taking place earlier today in central Wyoming, central and southern Wyoming, there up in the higher elevations. So, again, there has been quite a bit that we have been looking at for this evening. Again, the good news is right now we don't have any severe or tornado warnings here in the state of Missouri, but that is where we are at right now here on GWP Live. So let's go ahead, and it appears that we are having some technical difficulties with Isaac here. Isaac, are you able to hear me here on the line? So it appears that is not the case. Again, this is live, so we do occasionally run into some technical difficulties during our live streams here. But let's go ahead and let's get a closer look at what we're dealing with here in the state of Missouri, because that is our main focus here. We have some ongoing flash flood warnings across the viewing area. So let's go ahead and we'll take a closer look at those here along US 54. We've got a couple of flash flood warnings from some of the heavier rainfall that we had earlier today. So flash flood warning remains in effect until 8 p.m. across Benton, Camden, Hickory, Miller, and Morgan counties until 8 p.m. At 4:15 p.m., local law enforcement reported flooding was occurring due to the heavy rainfall across the area. We had between 2 and 4 inches of rainfall that had fallen, with additional rainfall amounts of up to an inch are going to be possible. So again, law enforcement has confirmed that we do have some ongoing flooding across this area that includes Camdenton, Max Creek, over to Edwards and to Climax Springs. We've also got over into Lake of the Ozarks as well. So again, several different areas under this new flash flood warning until 8 p.m. And again, we have had some of that observed flooding across the area. Then we go a little bit further to the east and we have another flash flood warning that also remains in effect for Camden, Miller, and Pulaski counties until 8 p.m. And this is a radar indicated threat. So again, we don't necessarily have that observed flooding across that area, but again, we do still have that flash flood warning, as we do have that concern for some of the flooding because of several inches of rainfall that have fallen across this area. And then we have another flash flood warning that was issued along US 50, so that's something else that we're watching right now across Crawford, Franklin, Gasconade, and Warren counties until 9:15. Radar indicated threat with that warning as well. So that's from some of the heavier rain that we have. Notice that we have some heavier storms moving through along Interstate 44, along the Rolla area, and into Waynesville as well. A few showers across the Camdenton area, so a few thunderstorms moving through there. Things have started to clear out here across western Missouri. No longer seeing that rain and storms that we had earlier today across Nevada. So that has helped us to dry out a little bit. Same thing goes as we go down towards Lamar, Joplin. We haven't really seen as much rainfall. The storms have kind of really stalled out across central Missouri and never really made it to Joplin or Springfield. We had a couple of isolated storms that developed earlier this afternoon across that region, but overall, the heaviest of the rain and storms that we've seen has really set up shop across central and northern and western Missouri, not necessarily southern Missouri. So Interstate 44 has kind of been as far south as those storms have gone, and so that has been really some good news for our areas down to the south, that we haven't necessarily seen as much precipitation develop across those regions here. And so yes, that is what we're dealing with here right now. It appears that we're still dealing with some technical difficulties with Isaac Hedges here. And So, yes, so it appears that you were not able to hear me as part of the reason, but we have been live we have been back on the air here the last few minutes. Um, so, yes, had some technical difficulties there.
Yes, great to know. So hopefully all of the folks at home, unlike myself, were able to hear things over the past few minutes. Not sure how long you've been back on, Jake, but it appears we've had some technical difficulties there. We thank all of you, the folks at home, for bearing with us through all of these technical difficulties as we continue to cover some of tonight's severe weather across the nation. So if you should have any questions regarding that, you can always call in with those questions at 417-448-0819. With all those burning questions, we will answer them to the best of our ability at 417-448-0819. We'd love to hear what those questions may be. Jake?
Yeah, so yeah, if you want to go ahead and call in through that number, we can go ahead and we can get those questions answered. Hopefully, we'll have some better luck answering your questions than we've had with some of our technical difficulties. So let's go ahead and we can go back to kind of what we were looking at here just moments ago with that radar picture. And so again, overall, things have cleared out in the last several hours, but we do still have those flash flood warnings. This serves as an important reminder that we can still have flooding in areas where the rain has stopped. So flash flooding, sometimes it can take a little bit for everything to just kind of the runoff and everything, some of that ponding to clear up. And so that's why we can still have ongoing flooding even though the rain has stopped across some of these locations.
Absolutely. Some great information on that in terms of some of the rain across these regions. Again, continuing to track that. Jake, what new developments are we seeing here?
Yeah, well, one of the biggest developments that I'm seeing is that we've already had the radar is estimating along and north of US 54 that we have picked up anywhere from about 3 to upwards of 5 or 6 inches of rainfall. And so that's part of the reason why we are seeing some flooding here across the Lake of the Ozarks, just particularly because we've had potentially 3 or 4 inches. I will say that this radar estimated rainfall totals is not 100% accurate. Usually it overestimates by just a little bit, but still, if you kind of go on the lower end of the legend, let's say, that's still around 2.5 to 4 inches, maybe some areas around 5 inches of rainfall. So again, that's still a pretty significant rainfall that we've seen. And this has just been within really the last 12 to 15 hours that we've seen this. These storms started around 5 or 6 a.m. along US 54. And then again, as we mentioned, they really stalled out along US 54 and they never really made it into our southern counties. We have some areas that have remained either almost completely dry or in some cases are completely dry. Across Springfield, Joplin, we've had a few showers with maybe around 1/10 to 1/4 of an inch of rainfall across that region. Springfield, though, it appears that we don't really have any rainfall that has been observed across that area. And so, again, our far southern counties have had little to no rainfall today, but that's really kind of quite a comparison to what we've seen along and north of US 54, where we have flash flood warnings in some areas that have picked up estimated totals of around 4 to 5 inches of rainfall.
Absolutely, some great developments on that. Again, up to 4 to 5 inches of rainfall, so a decent amount already up to this point across the region. Just one of the sort of conditions, one of the common themes that we're looking at here, a lot of rain with these different storms. So certainly worth pointing out on that. Jake, any other major new developments? Any other things across the region that we ought to be aware of at this point, perhaps beyond this?
Yes, and so the fact that we've already seen, at least a decent amount of some of that flooding concerns over the last few hours is certainly concerning. Especially, some areas have already picked up 4 or 5 inches of rainfall. Well, we are expecting to see more rainfall later this evening into the morning hours for tomorrow. And so the fact that we've already seen some flooding before we've had the final round of storms is certainly something that we need to take notice of. In fact, we do have some other areas, including Jefferson City, Fulton, through California, Missouri, that are under flood advisories as well. So those areas have also seen quite a bit of rainfall that has prompted these different weather alerts. And so flooding is definitely going to be a concern through this evening. If we go to the Weather Prediction Center and their flood outlook that they've issued, we are under a moderate risk for flooding. This means that we have around a 40% chance of seeing flash flooding within 25 miles of a given location. And so, again, we're under that moderate risk. This is a 3 out of 4 on the Weather Prediction Center's flood scale or flood risk. And so, this includes Kansas City, where we already had quite a bit of heavy rainfall, but especially through our central counties where we've had the heaviest of rainfall along US 54, including Nevada here, stretching through El Dorado Springs. You've got Camdenton, Lake of the Ozarks, Sedalia, Warrensburg, Springfield, Joplin, pretty much all of our viewing area except for Jefferson City, California, and Columbia are under this moderate flood risk. And so this is really, not necessarily the highest flood risk that we can see, but it's the highest flood risk that we've had so far this season. Most of the other days that we've had heavy rainfall, we've either been in a marginal or slight risk, that green or that yellow. But today we are in that moderate category, which is definitely the highest flood risk that we've had so far this season.
Absolutely. Highest flood risk of the season, you said, Jake. So a monumental thing right there. Again, you're seeing right now, this is exactly why you tune in for GWP Live severe weather coverage. Again, for breaking updates as these things happen in terms of this severe weather and to be informed. These things might be happening in your region and you want to be prepared. You want to know how to take the appropriate precautions. On the off chance, though, that we are not live streaming during a severe weather event, you still want to be prepared. We have another great resource for that you can access anytime on the Great World Productions YouTube channel. That would be our severe weather preparedness video. So we go over in that video a few of the most common severe weather conditions and what precautions are appropriate to take in order to be prepared. And when these things are happening, again, how to respond, how to stay safe during these events. So a number of different things are worth knowing. So if you haven't seen it yet, you want to, after tonight's live stream, go on over and check out a GWP severe weather preparedness video, all that and much more here on the Great World Productions YouTube channel. Jake?
Yes, so yeah, I want to make sure to check that out because that is where you're going to get all of the necessary information that you need to know. That being said, we will cover a little bit of that during these live streams, just in between when we're talking about different storms, just kind of giving you some helpful little insights on that. But if you want to get all of that information all in one video, then you want to go ahead and you want to check out that video. There's a possibility that we may add to that in the future, so you may also want to stay tuned for that as well. So that's what we're dealing with on the flood risk. And again, as of right now, I think our biggest threat here in the state of Missouri, or at least what we have the highest chance of seeing, is going to be flooding. I think overall, the severe thunderstorms that we're going to be dealing with, I think that risk is going to be a little bit on the lower side. But the flooding risk is a little bit more elevated. And so that is why we wanted to kind of start off by looking at that risk that we're dealing with for flooding. So, but again, here across the country, we're dealing with several different threats here. We've got snow and blizzard, we've got fires, we've got dust storms, we've got flooding, we've got severe storms, and we've also got heat. But the good news is here in the state of Missouri, we're only dealing with two of those. We've got the flooding and the severe weather that we're going to be dealing with this week. But again, the flooding is going to outweigh the risk for severe storms.
Absolutely. So a huge day for severe weather across the country. Again, just some flooding and storms across the state of Missouri here. Again, our state, wherein our regional listening area lays. Beyond that, though, across the country, a couple other things you mentioned that we're dealing with. Some very severe conditions down in Texas. We've got the dust storm going on, as you mentioned, across Amarillo and over on the West Coast. And California, we've got wildfires going on. So a number of different things across the region. We're, of course, primarily focusing on things going on in Missouri because that's where we're from, of course. That's where we broadcast from. But we will touch naturally on some other major events across the country as these things happen. Jake?
Yes, and a part of the reason why we're touching on some of them is just because they are so severe and so significant. Something that we mentioned a little bit ago was that fire risk across Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, and far southwestern Kansas. And if we look at the Storm Prediction Center's fire weather outlook for today, it goes up to a 3. That's the highest on their scale, and that's exactly what we have today across this kind of pink or purplish area. So we've got that extreme fire risk there that remains in effect. That is a 3 out of 3 on the fire weather index scale. So this is the highest risk that we can see for wildfires, and that does include just north of Lubbock into Amarillo, stretching up into Dodge City, Kansas as well. So again, anytime that we're dealing with an extreme fire risk, we are talking about substantial fire conditions. We're talking about wildfires that can start very easily, but not only start very easily, but can spread and get out of control very easily. And so that's one of the big concerns that we have anytime that we're talking about this extreme fire risk. And so obviously you don't want to do any sort of outdoor burning. Really no open flame at all is recommended across these areas because things can get out of control very quickly when we do that. We've also got that critical fire risk across New Mexico, as we've had some ongoing fires across that region. And then we do also have an elevated fire risk across central California, where we do have that red flag warning that remains in effect for today as well. So that has been something that's been a really big concern. One of the main reasons we have such a high fire threat for today is because of some of the really strong winds that we've been dealing with out of the storm system. Anytime we're dealing with a storm system of this magnitude, it can create some very strong winds, and that can spread fires over the dry vegetation. Speaking of those winds, some of the strong damaging winds that we've had today, whether it's been from just, the storm system itself, whether it's been from the storms, or whatever it's been from, we've had quite a few power outages that have resulted from the severe weather that we've seen today, and that includes several states here across the Great Lakes. Total across the U.S., we are up to 209,590 customers without power. That includes 95,000 customers without power in the state of Michigan. You multiply that times 3 people on average per household, and that means that we have around 6 to 700,000, no pun intended, people that are currently without power. So over 500,000 people currently are in the dark. And also, of course, it's getting to the point in the year where it's getting pretty warm outside. And so that means that these areas also are without air conditioning as well. And so that, of course, is a really big concern across some of these areas. Maybe not necessarily Michigan, as it's a little bit cooler there in Michigan, but some of these areas especially, we're going to notice the heat a little bit with no AC for 600,000 Americans here.
Absolutely. As you mentioned, Jack, 600,000 Americans affected by this. Am I right on that number?
Yes, about 600,000, and we're estimating that based on the fact that 209,000 households are without power. If you guess, the estimate is that there's around 3 to 3.5 people per household on average, and so that means that we're probably at least at 600,000, if not even closer to 700,000.
Absolutely. So, major development on that front. 600,000, an estimated 600,000 people across the country right now without power. So, again, a thing that we see from time to time when we're dealing with these severe weather conditions is power outages. So, not a great thing, especially where they're dealing with extreme temperatures, in this case, extreme heat. Again, that's no bueno. Again, when we've grown used to air conditioning, well, it's no fun when that goes out when we have power outages and different things. So, all the folks at home, out across the country, wherever you may be tuning in from, we thank you for your support. If you haven't already, you want to subscribe to Great World Productions on YouTube. Ring that bell to receive notifications each time we have a new release, each time we go live for severe weather events, anything like this, so you don't miss a single thing. Now, in terms of these power outages, across the region. Many of the folks at home, possibly with as many people across the country dealing with power outages at this time. It's possible that your power's out right now. Hopefully, we're all coming through loud and clear. We have dealt already with a couple of technical difficulties tonight. We thank you all for your patience through all of this as we troubleshoot some of those minor technical difficulties that we've dealt with. So, whether you've got full power, whether we're coming to you through a battery powered mobile device, you'll have to stay tuned again for all of this. We thank you again for listening. So, just a number of people with power outages, and that is no bueno. So, what else should we know about the weather going on at this time, Jake?
Yeah, I guess kind of looking at a few areas that have been affected by winds that have led to power outages. I guess one place that really comes to mind was Chicago, where we had that 79-mile-per-hour wind gust that was reported earlier this morning. We had quite a few thousand customers without power. Currently, Cook County is where Chicago is in, Cook County, Illinois, and we're currently at about 4,200 customers. So that number has come down quite a bit, considering there's 2.4 million customers. That's not really that large of a population. As we mentioned, some pretty strong winds have blown through Michigan, so a few counties are currently seeing several thousand outages. We're dealing with that across Michigan right now. Something else that really stands out is where we've had the fires around Amarillo, Armstrong County, Texas. Around 45% of the county is without power, so that's pretty significant. We did have some wind damage earlier this morning across Boone County in Columbia, so we'll see if we can get some numbers on where our power outages are there, and it appears that we're having some issues with that right now. But again, there were some power lines down. We had a 71-mile-per-hour wind gust that was reported in southern Boone County earlier this morning, and there was also some damage that was reported. I saw some footage from a KOMU 8 where there was some power or some trees that were down across that area. That's a local news station out of Columbia, Missouri, and so there was a little bit of damage. 71-mile-per-hour wind gust was reported earlier this morning at around 6:05 a.m., I believe is the time stamp on that. So again, 71 mile
That's
per hour
right.
wind gust out of that. And then, of course, we've got some ongoing severe and tornado warnings across Kansas. So we're starting to see some power outages mount with that. And then we've also had in Wyoming, we had that blizzard earlier today, and so that has led around 5,500 customers without power. That's 59% of the county's population there, and then even some counties in Northern California dealing with some ongoing power outages as well, including this one here where there's about 5% of the county without power. So again, several different areas spread out here across the U.S. where we have been dealing with some power outage concerns. You'll notice that we just updated it. It was at 209,000. Now we're at 213,000. So the power outages are gradually going up here as these strong storms continue to move through the country here.
Absolutely. So, just a little bit of information on that. As it would seem, many folks across the country now dealing with power outages. Again, one of those issues that we see from time to time when we're dealing with severe weather. And a great resource we often cite on that front, poweroutage.com, where you can view for yourself. Again, as we've shown routinely for the viewers out there, you've seen on your screens just a few moments ago some of the areas affected by power outages. Your area may be at this moment affected by power outages, and it's not necessarily a real time. This does rely on people actually reporting their power outages. That is something that you can do if you're in a region. Presumably, you've got some sort of device, you're able to tune in and access this. Well, you also have the ability to go and report your power outages. And when you go online and report those, that makes the power companies aware in terms of time to restore power, different things like that. So this will really help things out to report that wherever you may be across the country, whatever you may be experiencing at this point with regard to possible severe weather across your region. If you've got any questions on it, if you'd like to make a report, if you'd like to let us know how your power's doing, your power's out, anything like that, you can call in at 417-448-0819. Let us know how things are going. Any of your questions, we can answer those at 417-448-0819. Jake, anything else we ought to know? Any new developments on this front?
Well, I guess I'll just mention that if you are calling in from a landline, then we are definitely going to say, well, that's a little bit suspicious if you're reporting that your power is out there. So, um, but anyways, that's just something to keep in mind. But if you are calling from a mobile device, then you can let us know here using that number, as you mentioned, to report that your power is out. Of course, right now it doesn't appear that we have a lot of power outages across the viewing area, but those numbers will likely go up here as the storms continue through the rest of this evening. Let's go ahead
Well,
and just
yes.
kind of briefly look at the different weather alerts that we have here now across the country. Looks like we've had some expansion on some of the different tornado warnings here across, and we're going to look at this a little bit closer here in a little bit. Also, St. Louis just went under a flash flood warning, so I just thought I would point that out. St. Louis has also seen quite a bit of rainfall. In fact, let's just get a quick radar estimate from that here in St. Louis. How much rainfall have we seen there in St. Louis? It appears kind of we're in that pink range, so around 3 inches of rainfall, maybe a few pockets that have seen 4 inches. So again, still significant amount of rainfall. Also, something else that we want to point out about that is these are urbanized areas which flood a little bit more easily because there's not soil to absorb all of the water. And so that's part of the reason why we're likely seeing flash flood warnings with less rainfall in urbanized areas. But St. Louis now under that flash flood warning for the next several hours, so that is something that we will continue to be monitoring as well. All right, well, we are now going to move into another brief 3-minute intermission. We will return at the bottom of the hour. This is GWP Live Severe Weather Coverage. Don't go anywhere. And we are back here. This is GWP Live's ongoing severe weather coverage. It is Monday, May 18th, 2026. It is now 5:30 p.m. and we are covering some of the ongoing hazardous weather here across the country with a central focus on the ongoing flooding and severe storm threat that we're going to be dealing with as we go through the rest of today into the early morning hours on Tuesday here across our local viewing area. So, let's see. We had some technical issues with Isaac the last time we came back from intermission. Isaac Hedges, are you currently able to hear me, and are you currently on the live stream here? All right, and so I take that as a no. We will see if we can get that adjusted here very soon. So, of course, we talked a little bit about how St. Louis has now been is now under a flash flood warning. Sometimes the urbanized areas can deal with flooding a little bit more on the extreme scale, and so that's exactly why we have the flash flood warnings. It can flood a little bit easier or easily across that area. We've still got some showers and some storms that are moving across that area. The rainfall rates have came down a little bit within this complex as we've seen some weakening here in the last few hours. Really what happened is we had those storms across Nebraska, Iowa, and Kansas during the overnight hours yesterday. They started during the evening. They moved their way further towards the south. They continued to slide across the state of Missouri, starting in Kansas City, moving their way towards Columbia, bringing some 71-mile-per-hour wind gusts around the airport earlier this morning around 6 a.m. They then weakened below severe limits around 5 or 6 a.m. and pushed along US 54, brought several inches of rainfall as we had training thunderstorms across Nevada, over through Lake of the Ozarks, some areas picking up around 4 or 5 inches of rainfall. That was from radar estimates we had around Camden County, Hickory County, St. Clair County. There were several others that saw quite a bit of rainfall that I'm not recalling at this point in time, but those were just some of the ones that saw several inches of rainfall. We had heavy thunderstorms for several hours, but then they really began to stall out along US 54, and so our far southern counties, including Joplin and Springfield, really didn't have any accumulating rain. We had a few isolated thunderstorms around the lunchtime hour that developed around the Joplin area, but other than that, we haven't really seen a whole lot of rainfall across southern Missouri as those storms just kind of stalled out and stopped. And then they eventually moved a little bit further towards the east, and so now they're moving through St. Louis. They have now moved out of the areas across the Lake of the Ozarks where we had some of that flooding earlier today. We do still have flash flood warnings that remain in effect until 8 p.m. this evening along US 54 around Lake of the Ozarks, because again, sometimes we can still deal with flash flooding even after the rainfall has stopped. So that's exactly the threat that we're dealing with here across these areas. All right, and so we'll go ahead and we'll see here. Isaac, are you currently able to hear me here on the live stream? Are we still dealing with some technical difficulties with you? Yeah, so it does appear that we are still dealing with those technical difficulties. Again, we will get him back on the air as soon as we are able to, but that's currently what we're dealing with there. So, yes, that's what we're dealing with our flooding. Again, I also want to remind you that the Weather Prediction Center has put the majority of our viewing area all the way from Kansas City to Warrensburg, Sedalia, Nevada, over to Springfield, Raleigh, Joplin, Lamar, Stockton Lake, Lake of the Ozarks. All of these areas are under a moderate risk for flooding. That's a 3 out of 4 on their flood outlook scale. And so Jefferson City and Columbia under that slight risk, that's a 2 out of 4 on that scale. And so again, the highest risk today for flooding is going to be across western and central Missouri here in our viewing area. Also, just something else I wanted to point out. This is the highest risk that we have been under from the Weather Prediction Center's flood outlooks all season. So in other words, this is the highest flood threat we've had all season here in the state of Missouri. And so again, our big concern today is going to be the flooding that we could be dealing with here across the state of Missouri. The National Weather Service, the National Weather Service office in Springfield, Missouri, put out in their weather story talking about the additional rainfall that's forecasted over the next 24 hours. They said that additional rainfall of 1 to 3 inches with localized amounts of up to 4 inches is going to be possible. We also know that there is a flood watch that remains in effect for several counties in our viewing area. So you'll notice that our southern counties are not under that watch, but everywhere else is included under this flood watch. That includes Kansas City, Columbia, over to Sedalia, Warrensburg, Harrisonville, Nevada, Stockton Lake, Warsaw, Osage Beach, Jefferson City, Lake of the Ozarks, Lebanon, all under the flood watches. Really, the only areas that are not under that that are not under that flood watch are Joplin and then Springfield and Lamar. Those are really the only areas in our viewing area that are currently not under that flood watch. That has now been extended. It was originally forecasted to go until 8 p.m., but it is now expected to continue until 1 p.m. tomorrow. So this flood watch remains in effect through 1 p.m. Tuesday, as we could be looking at a few more inches of rainfall on top of the rainfall that we've already seen. And so again, our main risk is going to be flooding, but we are also going to have those strong 2 severe thunderstorms here across the region. The Storm Prediction Center outlining us here in that yellow for the majority of our viewing area. That's a 2 out of 5 on the SPC severe weather risk. So we've got that. So 2 out of 5 for most of us. Kansas City, our northwestern counties, northwestern Missouri, is actually under that enhanced risk, a little bit higher on the scale. 3 out of 5 on that severe weather index scale. That's the areas in orange on the map. And then we even have a small area in central and northern Kansas where we have a moderate risk for severe weather. That is a 4 out of 5 on the Storm Prediction Center scale. So again, the highest risk is 5. So far, the Storm Prediction Center has not issued a high risk for anywhere so far this season. The highest risk that they've gone up to is a 4 so far this season. We've seen that issued, I believe, about 7 times so far. Maybe about 5 to 7 times we've seen that issued so far this year. But again, we so far have not had that high risk issued for anywhere on any day across the United States here. But again, Kansas is where that highest tornado risk is going to be for today, but we are still under that a little bit of a lower risk, but still a risk here, a 2 out of 5 for the majority of our viewing area, 3 out of 5 for Kansas City. Let's go ahead and break down the different hazards that we're going to be dealing with. So again, as we mentioned, we do have that tornado risk anytime that we're dealing with severe weather, or at least most of the time. And so with the tornado risk, I want to kind of zoom in here and show you a closer view, because we do have several areas within our viewing area that are under this hatched area. And this is where we could be dealing with EF2 tornadoes or stronger. We even have that secondary hatched area across central Kansas, northwestern Missouri. This is where we could be looking at EF3 tornadoes or stronger. So it's particularly where we have these lines that go from top left to bottom right. This area right in here, we are looking at the risk of EF3 tornadoes or stronger, but we also have that hatched area extending into Iowa and Oklahoma, as well as into Kansas City and just north of Nevada, where we have an EF2 risk as well. As far as the likelihood for tornadoes, it appears that we have Isaac Hedges here back on the live stream here. Seems like we had some technical difficulties with that. Isaac, are you back here on the live stream? Is that correct?
Yes, back here. Glad to be back, my friend. I can hear everything loud and clear. We thank you all at home again for dealing with things. Again, sticking with us through all of these technical difficulties. We've had several of them already throughout the night. So as always, we thank you for your patience throughout the night as well. If you have any questions along the course of the evening, you can always call in to have those answered regarding what sort of weather you may be experiencing, different things like that at 417-448-0819. Have all those burning questions answered. Hopefully, though, you're not burning, experience anything of those wildfires, anything like that, but call in and let us know at 417-448-0819.
Yes, and you mentioned the fires. In fact, I do have one quick update that I want to share with the dust storm slash fire that we've been dealing with here across the state of Texas around Amarillo, the dust storm warning that we had south of Amarillo in Canyon, Texas, that dust storm warning, actually, by the way, this is the second dust storm that we've had just within the last 5 days. So I just thought that was something that's kind of crazy. We had one in the middle of last week. I believe that was on Wednesday, or it might have been Thursday. It was Wednesday or Thursday that we had that. But now we're dealing with another dust storm. The dust storm warning for Canyon, Texas, along Interstate 27 and US 87 has been extended until 7:15 p.m. This is for Randall County and the Panhandle of Texas. Here's the latest at 5:14 p.m. Central Daylight Time. So in our time zone, a dust channel was over Canyon and is nearly stationary. Hazards include less than a quarter-mile visibility with strong winds of excess of 40 miles per hour. The satellite imagery is the source, and again, we're dealing with dangerous, life-threatening travel across the Canyon, Texas area along Interstate 27. So Canyon, Texas, life-threatening travel across that area is expected. We are also still dealing with impacts at the Amarillo, Texas airport. They're under an airport weather warning until 7 p.m. We've had several hour delays in and out of the Amarillo airport. So that's something else that we're dealing with. And then, if that wasn't enough, the fact that we had a dust storm in Canyon, Texas, south of Amarillo, on the northwest side of Amarillo, we have a fire warning in the Amarillo area. The request of the Amarillo Area Office of Emergency Management has reported in southern Potter County that there is a fire warning. At 4:54 p.m., a dangerous wildfire was located 6 miles northeast of Bushland, or 9 miles northwest of Amarillo, moving rapidly northeast at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And although 5 to 10 miles per hour might seem very slow, because we talk about, when it comes to tornadoes, they typically move around 40 to 60 miles per hour, so that seems really slow, but 5 to 10 miles per hour is pretty fast for a wildfire. In fact, let's go ahead and show you. Here's that fire warning that we have across the areas. This goes until 9 p.m. We're also, so again, be prepared to evacuate if you are under this fire warning, as a dangerous wildfire is moving at a rapid rate here just to the northwest of Amarillo in Texas.
Absolutely, some great information on that. Some of the wildfires going on in the area, those moving at speeds of 5 to 10 miles per hour doesn't sound terribly high. Again, much different than the wind gusts, certainly. But that's a fairly rapid rate for a wildfire to expand, different things like that. And again, with the different things that come into play, the winds and different things like that, could be even higher than that. So certainly you want to take precautions if you are nearby in the path of this fire. You want to get out. You want to evacuate your home. Take the appropriate precautions, certainly. Unfortunately, we see loss from time to time with these different events, homes, buildings. Again, it's very tragic. But again, what's much more tragic is the actual loss of human life. That's something that you can do, something that can be done to prevent that. Again, there's a reason why folks are called on to evacuate the areas when these wildfires are coming across their region. So certainly, if you're in that path, would be a good time to do so, wouldn't it, Jake?
Yes, it certainly would be. So again, if you are in the area of northwest of Amarillo and you are experiencing that wildfire, you will want to evacuate or at least prepare to do so if you are in that situation. And I think what makes this situation especially dangerous is that we're dealing with a dust storm really almost in the same area as a fire. And so some people who may be trying to evacuate from the fire may not be able to see where they're going because of the blowing dust. And then on top of that, if that wasn't already bad enough, you've also got smoke that's going to be coming off of this wildfire that's going to add to the visibility trouble with the dust. And so I think that's what makes this situation dangerous, is that we have a dust storm and a fire that is moving across the same area, and that's going to make travel very tricky and very dangerous, not to mention the air quality troubles across this area too.
Absolutely, some great information on that, Jake. And certainly across the region, you have very nearby these wildfires going on, as well as this dust storm across Texas. So, certainly, folks, one way or another, likely in the case of these wildfires, as you mentioned, attempting to evacuate to get out of that. Visibility conditions may be greatly reduced due to the dust storm going on. Again, that combined with, again, fairly large wildfires. So, some of the smoke caused by that combined with the dust floating around from the dust storm across the region, that's going to greatly reduce your visibility. So, any of the folks who may be in that region or on the road in that region, perhaps trying to evacuate if they're in the path of the wildfire, which you need to do, by the way, they tell you that for a reason. But again, those visibility conditions could be greatly impacted, greatly reduced by that. So, again, if you're in that region, okay, you want to make a point to get out, especially if you're in the direct path of that wildfire. But you want to be careful because you might not be able to see the road as things usually are. Now, in terms of road conditions, we've talked also a lot tonight about some different flooding. We've covered this extensively in terms of what to do in the case of flooded roadways. Now, in the case of that, we've seen from time to time folks will encounter flooded roadways on their usual route. They're bound and determined to get to where they're going, regardless of any flooded roadways, and they decide to drive right on through it. Hydroplaning, what is that? No, this is not a good decision. Again, it can be very risky and oftentimes didn't shake out too well for the drivers in those situations. So you want to avoid driving through considerable floodwaters, different things like that when it comes to these conditions. Jake?
Yes, yeah. So again, if you are encountering a flooded roadway, you'll want to make sure to turn around and don't drown in that situation. And so that, of course, is another concern. So again, anytime that you're traveling out on the roadways and dealing with hazardous weather, you need to be aware of the many dangers that will be out there. And so that's something to definitely consider. And I want to give perspective because this just shows how, in my opinion, just really how crazy this storm system is. We have ongoing fires and we've got dust storms and winds and dry conditions here across the panhandle of Texas. And then just a couple hundred miles away from that, we have some ongoing severe storms here across western Oklahoma. So really a tale of two different worlds in the weather department going on here across the Central Plains. And a lot of this has to do with the dry line. This is not the exact position of the dry line. This is just an estimate of where it might be. It might actually be more like over here, or it might be more like this here, but that's basically where it is. Somewhere in this area is where the dry line is. And so this is where we have that extreme separation in moist air versus dry air. And so where we see the collision of the dry air and the moist air, that is where our thunderstorms are developing. On the east side of the dry line, we have the severe threat, as you can see here across Oklahoma. And then on the west side of that, we have very dry conditions that have made it favorable for the development of fires. So fire threat on the west side of the dry line, severe threat when it comes to storms on the eastern side of the front. And then on the northern side of all of it, in the mountains, of course, that's where we're dealing with the snow. And so that's how we deal with multiple hazards within one storm system. It all has to do with the positioning of where you're at with this particular storm system. So that's how we're seeing what we're dealing with here across those areas. So let's go ahead
Absolutely.
and I want to show you some of the different areas that are going to be at risk for severe weather because, again, we have had a few storms that have started to develop across Oklahoma. So let's go ahead and go back here to the severe weather map here from the Storm Prediction Center. And so you'll notice that Texas is under that risk here across west central Texas. We've got that marginal risk for severe weather. And then again, our fire risk is right in here, just to the west of where we have the severe weather threat. And then the dry line, there's a very sharp cutoff right here. This is where we're dealing with the dust storm and the fires. That's in Amarillo, Texas right now. So again, very sharp cutoff between the different weather systems here that we're dealing with across that area. So that's what we're dealing with there. Let's go ahead and so we'll show you some of the other areas. Again, moderate risk for severe storms across Kansas. This is where we've got that highest risk for severe weather. So we've been dealing with that. But this has gone pretty far to the north. We've also had Iowa, Minnesota, even eastern Nebraska, Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, and then also across the Great Lakes, across Michigan, we've had some straight line damaging winds across that region as well. And it's possible those storms might even cross over through Canada, and they might even make their way across New York and Pennsylvania in the Northeast. And so that's another area that we're dealing with that. And then we're also looking at here in the next few hours a few storms that could try to develop just to the west of Interstate 95. So again, lots of different areas today that are dealing with different hazardous weather. We've also had some storms there across Florida, but we haven't really seen any severe weather out of that for us today. So that's what we're dealing with on that. As we mentioned, across most of these areas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Iowa, Minnesota, we have that tornado risk, but we have an even higher tornado risk in this hatched area across Kansas, really in that red area where EF3 tornadoes are going to be possible. Long track tornadoes will also be a possibility across that region as well. Wind threat, straight line damaging winds. Here in the local viewing area, we are now under, this is a new update from just a little bit ago, but most of our viewing area is now under that hatched area as it disappears on me, is under that hatched area for 75-mile-per-hour winds. So let's go ahead and get that back up for you there. So again, this now includes our viewing area where we do have, we'll just go ahead and redraw that here. So this is for Kansas City, up through Columbia, Jefferson City, Lake of the Ozarks, and then down through Nevada and Lamar. We now do have those hatch marks where we could be looking at 75-mile-per-hour winds. So straight line damaging winds of 75 miles per hour or greater is going to be a possibility. That's going to be one of the main hazards that we're going to be dealing with during the overnight hours. And so we've got that going on, and then we also have a hail risk as well, and this doesn't even take into effect the flood risk that we mentioned as well, but we've also got that hail risk. Kansas City looking at the possibility of lime-size hail. The hail threat here in Missouri is going to be a lot lower in comparison to our wind risk and our tornado risk that we're going to have, but some big hail is going to be expected there across Kansas for today here. So that's what we're dealing with right now here when we look at the Storm Prediction Center's outlook when it comes to that. Let's go ahead and show you that future cast over the next few hours. So again, those storms continuing to develop across Kansas and Nebraska. The storms that we had out there earlier today, those have now started to advance further towards the east, and so those have moved out, but this next round of storms is going to move through during the overnight hours. Around 9 p.m., that line of storms that's going to start to develop will move into the Kansas City metro area, and then it will move into northwestern counties around 10-11 p.m. It will move into the Nevada region around 11. Around midnight, it will make it to Joplin, Columbia, and Lake of the Ozarks, and then around 1 a.m. is when it will start to push out of the viewing area. But behind that, there's actually the possibility that we may get a secondary round of severe storms in the very early morning hours on Tuesday morning. So tomorrow morning, between about 3 and 5 a.m., another round of thunderstorms is expected. That being said, we will not be live during that time. Our live stream will end at the conclusion of this first round of storms around midnight or 1 a.m. So that's when our live stream will end. There will be some breaks in between that, of course, but as far as our coverage for the severe weather, that will end around 12 or 1 a.m. when that first round moves out of here. But make sure to keep your phones on while you go to bed after that time frame, because the second round of storms could also be severe, although the overall severe weather risk will be a lot lower out of the second round in comparison to the first round that we're going to see during the evening hours, not the overnight round.
Absolutely. Some great distinctions to make on that front. As you mentioned just a few moments ago, across much of our region, we are seeing very high gusts of wind, up to 75 miles per hour. So certainly capable of damage on that front. Again, the roofs, siding, trees, different things like that. Again, all of those things, it's possible that they'll receive damage as a result of these very high wind speeds. Now, You mentioned just a few moments ago as we go down to Texas, kind of looking at things in that region, a few different things going on there. We've got in one part sort of the very dry conditions where we've got the wildfires going on, where we've got the dust storm going on, and those sort of come up against, as we saw just moments ago, as you illustrated on the screen for us, Jake. The folks at home who are viewing will notice crucially that sort of dry line where that separates things, as you mentioned, sort of in terms of weather cycles, sort of two different worlds where they sort of collide. They come up against each other. A very sharp dry line right there, as you mentioned. Sort of two different worlds here, very much colliding at that particular point. Jake.
Yes, certainly so. Yeah, worlds definitely colliding along that dry line with the two different types of hazardous weather that we are dealing with there. Now, we want to go ahead and bring you a quick update before our next intermission, as we do have some ongoing tornado warnings. These two right here are flash flood warnings, so just wanted to make that distinction. But all of these right here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, we have yes, we have 9 tornado warnings in effect right now here across Kansas, Nebraska, Missouri, and Iowa. So we're going to go ahead, and there was a few of these warnings where we actually had a confirmed tornado with the storm. And so I wanted to give you an update on that here. That would be okay, this one right here, there was a confirmed tornado in around the Winford area. So this storm right now, confirmed tornado. I guess red's a really bad color for that. Um, and so,
Blends
yes,
in a bit.
right in here around the Winford area, just to the west of Rock in Kansas, we have a confirmed tornado with this storm here. And so we had two different tornado warnings. One remains in effect for Marshall County until 6 p.m. at 5, and then we have another one for Nemea and Marshall counties in Kansas until 6:45. The latest update was at 5:50 p.m. A confirmed tornado was located 6 miles southwest of Betty, moving northeast at 30 miles per hour. Weather spotters confirmed a tornado. Storm chasers continue to report a tornado with the storm. Locations impacted include Frankfort, Axtell, Betty, Summerfield, Vermillion, and Baileyville. And so we're also dealing with some ping pong ball size hail out of this storm as well. And so again, that latest scan on the velocity shows around the Winfred area that we do have some rotation, and storm spotters in the area confirmed that there was a tornado right in this area here across northeastern Kansas with that particular storm. So we have that storm, and then in southeastern Nebraska, we have another storm that goes in effect for Pawnee County until 6 p.m., also dealing with a pretty strong rotation just to the north of Pawnee City as well. So we've got that. Northwest of Manhattan, Kansas, another tornado warning is in effect for Riley, Pottawatomie, and Clay counties in Kansas till 6:30. Ping pong ball size hail is also possible. A National Weather Service meteorologist reported a brief tornado just north of Wakefield at 5:35. So this storm currently doesn't appear to be producing a tornado, but does have a history of producing tornadoes. There's where it did have a tornado right there. So again, history of producing tornadoes. We'll see if it continues to do so here. But for now, here we are going to go into a brief intermission. We will be back in just a couple of minutes. This is GWP Live Severe Weather Coverage. And we are back here on GWP Live's ongoing severe weather coverage. It is Monday, May 18th, 2026. It is just after 6 o'clock, 6:02 p.m. Central Daylight Time to be exact. And we are tracking some of the ongoing hazardous weather here across the United States with the central focus on the ongoing severe storm threat and flood threat that will be moving through the state of Missouri, some of the flooding that we have currently, and some of the severe storms that we're expecting later this evening and into the overnight hours. Here's the storms that we are going to be dealing with later this evening. The tornado threat is going to be highest over the next 2 to 3 hours. The tornado threat really started about 3 hours ago and will continue to be with us over the next several hours. And so we'll continue to track these storms as they approach the viewing area. Of course, our coverage will become a little bit more in depth once they actually make it into the viewing area. But as of right now, the storms are across Kansas, Nebraska, Missouri, and Iowa, where we've had several reported tornadoes. We've also had some very large hail across the region as well. This comes as we had several tornadoes that were reported on Sunday with quite a bit of damage. Some communities were totally leveled by tornadoes yesterday, and then we also had some wind damage that was less significant, but still 71-mile-per-hour winds that brought down some small tree limbs and took down some power lines there on the southern side of Columbia and Missouri. 71-mile-per-hour wind gust was reported there. Also across the local viewing area along US 54, really going from El Dorado Springs all the way over to Lake of the Ozarks, we had several inches of rainfall with some training thunderstorms that set up shop this morning into the early afternoon hours. Some areas radar estimates that we had 3 to 5 inches of rainfall with potentially even higher totals. Those storms then made their way further towards the east across the St. Louis region, and that's why we have some ongoing flash flood warnings across St. Louis. Some of those storms also moved into the Chicago, Illinois area, where we had some power outages and some damage reported. We also at the Midway Airport had a 79-mile-per-hour wind gust that was reported with some of those severe storms. They moved then during the early afternoon hours across the state of Michigan. Just within the last couple of hours, they moved through the Detroit area and are now moving across Lake Erie in Canada and could reemerge here across the Northeast as well. We've also had some storms moving through Indiana with some non-severe winds reported out of that. And so that's something that we've been tracking, and that doesn't even include all of the new storms that we've seen that have started to redevelop across Kansas, Nebraska, and Missouri, where we have that high-end tornado risk. And then even some storms have recently developed across Oklahoma along the dry line. And then we've even had some fire and some dust storms that have been developing on the west side of the dry line. And on the north side of the storm system, we've even had blizzard conditions in the state of Wyoming. So all sorts of different threats. We've got the severe storms, we've got the flooding, we've got the heat that's going on. I forgot to mention along Interstate 95, we've got some extreme heat, and then we've also got some fires, we've got some dust storms, and then we've got some snowfall as well. So again, pretty much just about every type of weather that we see here in the United States. The only thing that we're missing is a hurricane, which hurricane season in the Eastern Pacific just started on Friday. So you might as well count that in all of the craziness that we are experiencing here on this middle of May Monday, third Monday of the month here in 2026. So again, has been quite an interesting May 18th for us here in the United States here, and especially here in the state of Missouri with our flooding and severe storm threat that we have been dealing with. So we've had some technical difficulties. Isaac, are you back here on the live stream? We've had some issues with Isaac rejoining after the intermission.
Yes, I am. Yes, back on. It's great to hear you, Jake. And as you mentioned, certainly along the course of the night, we've been seeing just a great deal of meteorological madness. For the folks who are just now tuning in, perhaps we've seen a number of different things. Again, severe storms, again, tornadoes possibly forming down in Texas. We've seen a dust storm, fires going on, wildfires, Texas, California, a number of different things. And as you mentioned just a few moments ago, hurricane season sort of started on Friday, so we may as well throw that into this ridiculous mix of just a number of different severe weather conditions across the country. Jake?
Yes, I mean, pretty much the only thing that we're not dealing with, knock on wood, right now is a tsunami or an ice storm. Those are really the only two things that I can't think of that we're not currently, I guess an earthquake too, but I'm sure that there's at least some smaller earthquakes somewhere out there. But those are the only types of weather that I really can think of that we don't have right now. We pretty much have everything else. We've got wildfires, we've got dust storms, we've got heat, we've got snow, we've got blizzards, we've got cold temperatures, we've got tornadoes, we've got hail, we've got damaging winds, we've got flooding. We have even coastal flooding I saw out there in California today. Let's see, I mean, I guess we'll pull up the different national weather alerts and you can see, oh yeah, we've also had some air quality issues in the Northeast today as well. So you can throw that one into the mix. We've had strong winds with wind advisories that have delayed airport travels, like the there in Amarillo, or not Amarillo, well, we've had issues there too, but in Albuquerque, New Mexico, there's currently a ground stop there at the airport. So again, we've had just all sorts of issues here across the country, and I guess you can also add fog to the mix across northern Michigan. I've just been told that there was a dense fog advisory issued along uh, in northern Michigan there for that area. So northern Michigan around Marquette is under a dense fog advisory. So I guess you can add fog to the list of everything else that we have been dealing with here for today.
Absolutely, yes. So a number of major developments on that front. And Jake, speaking of Amarillo, Texas, of course, in that region we mentioned just a few moments ago, we got a couple things going on kind of around that area down in Texas. We've got the dust storm going on. We've got a wildfire going on there. So just a couple of different things. And you mentioned just a few moments ago, sort of one of the other things to throw into the mix are just all these different conditions that we're seeing in light of severe weather. One of those is air quality warnings. And well, naturally, things like that, like wildfires, like the dust storm, especially, are going to impact air quality. So, again, a few of these, again, causing these other warnings, warranting these other things, such as these air quality warnings. We're seeing that in addition to, of course, the wildfires across California. That, of course, is nothing new. That's something we've covered extensively here on GWP. The conditions across the state there make it especially prone to wildfires because of the Santa Ana winds in that region, the very warm temperatures and dry conditions. Number of different things again with the forests there make it particularly prone to that. And again, they're so dry that the conditions are particularly favorable there to wildfires and different things like that. So you so much as drop a match, a cigarette, or anything like that turns into a wildfire quickly. And there was a great deal of speculation on that. I believe, Jake, we've had episodes on the Great World Podcast where this has been covered extensively, and speculating some about the causes of the wildfires in California. Again, to what degree certainly wasn't helped by the natural conditions there, but a number of different things. We knew around that time there was some draining. Again, some of the forests, some of the water that would otherwise have gone to the forest was drained into the ocean. We saw that. Also, many of these areas where these things happened again in the past couple of years. Southern California, where we see some of these wildfires. We know that in those areas, there's been something of a homeless problem. There are also these forests nearby, and what we see oftentimes is that the homeless going up into the forests in these regions. And well, they often have open flames for warmth, for cooking, or whatever reason. And given the conditions, in a particular time of year, again, that is an especially high risk for beginning these fires, and they can just expand so rapidly, get out of hand so quickly. It is no joke, these fires going on right now, Jake.
Yeah, certainly. So again, that continues to be a really big concern there in the Amarillo area. We've got multiple different concerns here. In fact, I just want to read off here. Here's all of the different concerns in Amarillo. Amarillo, Texas is currently under an airport weather warning, a red flag warning, a dust advisory, and a wind advisory. That's how many different things that we're dealing with. So airport means obviously what you might think it means, that we're having airport delays for the wind. Red flag warning is the fire threat. The dust advisory is the reduced visibility from the blowing dust. And then we have a wind advisory, and that's the wind that's picking up the dust that's causing the visibility issues. So again, Amarillo under multiple different alerts, whether it's the wind advisory or it's the dust advisory or the blowing dust advisory that we're seeing across that area, and because of all of that, that has reduced visibilities. All right, let's go ahead, and I want to focus on a few other things here that we haven't looked at just yet. Again, let's go ahead and actually first let's go ahead and get an update on our power outages here. Okay, we've come down just a little bit. We were at 213,000 last check. Now we're at 205,000 customers that are currently without power right now. So that is something to consider. So again, pretty substantial power outages still going on, but things have come down just a little bit across that area. So let's go ahead, and I want to just bring some updates on the flash flood warnings. We don't really have anything new, but for those that just tuned in, we want to remind you of some of the ongoing flash flood warnings that we still have from some of the rainfall that we had earlier today. Flash flood warnings remaining along US 54 just to the east of US 65. Flash flood warning remains in effect until 8 p.m. across Benton, Camden, Hickory, and Miller counties. At 4:15 p.m., local law enforcement reported flooding occurring due to heavy rainfall that occurred with thunderstorms across the warned area. Between 2 and 4 inches of rain have already fallen, with additional rainfall amounts possible. Flash flooding is already occurring. Again, the source is law enforcement reported. Impacts include flash flooding of small creeks and streams, urban areas, highways, streets, and underpasses, as well as other poor drainage in low-lying water areas. Some locations that will experience flash flooding include Osage Beach, Camdenton, Village of the Four Seasons, Lake Ozark, Max Creek, Sunrise Beach, Lynn Creek, Groves Mills, Climax Springs, Bagnell, Lakeside, Barmington, Purvis, Hurricane Deck, Green Bay Terrace, Roach, Old Lynn Creek, Nobby, Rocky Mount, Branch, Edwards, Lakeview, Decaturville, Haston, Lake of the Ozarks, Hawatonka State Park, and Lake of the Ozarks State Park. So those are just some of the areas under that flash flood warning until 8 p.m. And then we also have an additional flash flood warning for Camden, Miller, and Pulaski counties until 8 p.m. And so that includes Osage Beach, Iberia, Brumley, Allman, and then Freeman, Kaiser, Montreal, and Lake of the Ozarks and Lake of the Ozarks State Park. And then we've also got a flood advisory across California, Missouri, Jefferson City, and over into Fulton, as well as flooding is going to be possible across those areas. The risk is a little bit less, but still something that we're dealing with here across the area. We also have a flash flood warning till 8:15 across western St. Louis on the Missouri side, and then on the Illinois side, flash flood warning for St. Louis until 9 p.m. So lots of ongoing flooding across the state of Missouri. That's what we're dealing with. Again, the majority of our viewing area is now dry as a lot of those storms have moved out, but additional storms later tonight could add to the ongoing flooding that we've already seen from this first round of storms there.
Yes, that's a great point, Jake. As you mentioned just a few moments ago, a few of the cities affected by this particular flood warning in Missouri certainly could be much more widespread, could be much worse at this point in time. Quite a few cities, though, as you mentioned, affected by this particular one at this point in time, though, again, could be much worse in terms of that. Just an example, something we mentioned a few moments ago for the folks who may have missed it, who just tuned in. This is not nearly as bad as what we're seeing. Again, not quite as severe as what we're seeing, for example, down in Amarillo, Texas. Just a number of different warnings, a number of different weather alerts in effect for the region there, Amarillo, Texas, just not receiving a break. They're having a rough day, to say the least. So we've already seen an airport weather warning there. We've seen a red flag warning. We see the dust storm going on there. Not far from there, a wildfire going on. So just a number of events. Again, Amarillo, Texas, not receiving a break today. To say the least, they're having a rough day. Jake?
Yes, certainly having a rough day across that area. All right, we just have some breaking news that we have that just came into us. A new tornado watch was issued that includes our northwestern counties. And so it hasn't actually popped up here yet on the radar. It's going to be in yellow when it does. And so, yeah, so we still don't have that just yet, but a new tornado watch was issued. I will tell you that it does not include Nevada, but it is just to the north of Nevada in Bates County. In fact, I'll go ahead and I will do kind of a somewhat of a bad drawing of what or where it's at here. And so let's see, it appears that we go from here to, well, I guess it's, yeah, so it's pretty much the area that was not under the last tornado warning, but it goes over to kind of right in here. We'll see how accurate this actually is, but kind of a rough sketch here of where it is, but it's roughly in this area, this yellow area that I've highlighted. So this area is roughly where the new tornado watch has been issued, and that now goes in effect until 1 a.m. Let's see. And okay, that's not quite it. There's still, that's not all of it yet. Um, so yes, I am seeing it here. This is from where I'm getting my information from is the Storm Prediction Center. So the Storm Prediction Center has issued a tornado watch, and it's somewhat in this. I think it actually goes a little bit further to the south. Goes a little bit further south, right in here too. But yeah, so that's basically kind of the outline of this. Oh wait, it goes down here. Okay. There it is. That area is also included too. So that is the new tornado watch area, roughly drawn, that goes in effect now until 1 a.m. So if you're in the yellow scribble, you are now under a tornado watch until 1 a.m. And so this goes for, here's the primary threats are going to be a couple of intense tornadoes possible, damaging winds upwards of 75 miles per hour, and hail up to lime size. That's going to be our main threats out of this newly issued tornado watch that includes the Kansas City area until 1 a.m. So, new tornado watch issued that does include our northwestern counties. And so, yeah, so we're still having some issues getting that tornado watch on there, but I do promise that it is there. We just have not seen that pop up there just yet. So again, still in Nevada, we're not under that watch just yet, but we do have that severe weather risk that will be with us a little bit later this evening. We just haven't quite gotten there yet. So, but again, Warrensburg, Sedalia, Harrisonburg, or Harrisonville rather, Butler, Kansas City, those are the areas that are now under this newly issued tornado watch that goes until 1 a.m. Of course, earlier today in Kansas, we had a PDS tornado watch, a particularly dangerous situation watch that was issued. That is not what this is. So this is not a particularly dangerous situation watch. It is a regular, if you want to call it regular tornado watch that has been issued.
Absolutely, some great information on that front, folks. If you'll direct your attention to your screens at this moment, all those viewing, if you'll direct your attention to your screen again, an area now highlighted, again, sort of drawn onto your screen, this newly issued tornado watch. So you want to take note of that, especially if you're in any of those areas. And for the folks who may need to brush up a little bit on what exactly that means, well, we go into it in depth in our GWP Severe Weather Preparedness video. That'd be a great resource, a great thing for you to watch a little bit later, perhaps right after this broadcast. Now, to sort of give the short version, when we're talking about a warning, a tornado, a warning, something like that, the conditions are favorable for a thing to form, different things like that. It's a serious risk, but again, not necessarily one yet. When it becomes a watch, a tornado watch, that means that it's an imminent threat in the area. So these are to
Yes,
be
it would be the
taken very
reverse there of
seriously.
that. Yes, the reverse there.
The reverse order, yes. Care to clarify a little bit?
Yeah, so the tornado watch means the conditions are favorable for the development of severe storms that could produce tornadoes. And then a tornado warning means that the tornado threat is imminent or is actually occurring. And so the tornado warnings are more localized. That means that there is a storm that is either likely producing a tornado or actually is. And so either indicated by radar or has been confirmed on the ground by storm chasers. And so a warning is the more immediate threat. A watch means that you need to be considerate that tornadoes might form across the area. So that's when you start making preparations. But the warning is actually when you take shelter for a tornado and take action.
Yes, an important distinction. Apologies, appear to have misspoken on that front. What we're seeing now is a tornado watch, so not quite as severe as it might be, but again, possibility that that becomes more severe. The area affected by that appears to be expanding. It has now been updated. Again, some of the area affected by that. The area indicated early on, again, earlier than the radar indicated. We had some delays, some issues with the radar, which happens from time to time. And that's exactly why you tune in to GWP Live Severe Weather coverage for all of this. Again, to find out about this first, this is the place to be. The best way to stay informed on all of this is to subscribe to Great World Productions on YouTube and hit that bell to receive notifications each time we have a new release, each time we go live, especially in the case of severe weather, different things like that. You do not want to be in the dark. You do not want to miss out. So don't miss out on it. You want to go over, if you haven't already, and subscribe. So again, as Jake illustrated, already sort of marked up on the map, sort of the anticipated region affected by this particular tornado watch. For whatever reason, there was a little bit of delay in the radar picture actually showing that, but it's now been updated, and the parts of the radar now are reflected again, actually mirroring the area. A little bit of gray area in there. Again, not 100%, but again, fairly accurate overall, Jake.
Yeah, so I did have one extra county, so we don't actually have a watch here. So this county was actually wrong. You're not under a tornado watch, but everywhere else that I had highlighted in the yellow is under a tornado watch now that it has fully come through here. So again, Kansas City over to Warrensburg, Sedalia is right in there. You got the Harry S. Truman Reservoir right there. You've got Interstate 49 right here, pretty busy. Interstate 70 is somewhere right in kind of in that general area. So again, Interstate 49 and 70, including the Kansas City area, under that newly issued tornado watch until 1 a.m. And then, of course, we will likely see the expansion of that watch later on into the evening hours. Probably it'll go until probably like 6 a.m. is when the new it'll go be it probably won't look quite like this, but something like this. So we'll continue to see those watches extend it as we go through the night, but at least in the short term, our next area that's under that risk for tornadic storms or severe storms in general is going to be Kansas City. And so that's what we're dealing with right now with Kansas City newly issued under that tornado watch. Let's go ahead and go into some of the warnings that we actually have across the area. So again, we've got the flash flood warnings, but we've also got these tornado warnings that have been active. So let's go a little bit more in detail. Some good news is that we did have a tornado warning earlier across the Kansas area, like around Manhattan. That has now expired, so that's good news. Still looking at some pretty strong winds and some large hail out of this storm around the Junction City area. So we've got 70-mile-per-hour winds and half-dollar size hail in Junction and Manhattan out of this particular area where we're seeing some pretty strong winds and hail across that area. Then you go further down to the south around the Wichita area. We've got additional severe thunderstorm warnings just to the northwest of Wichita. This goes for 70-mile-per-hour winds and half-dollar size hail across McPeterson, Reno, and Rice counties. And so that's something that we're dealing with. We also, in addition to that, have a wind advisory across this area too. So likely seeing some winds on top of the severe thunderstorm winds that we're going to be dealing with there. And so again, here's the storm Again, some half-dollar size hail is going to be possible out of this. We've got Hutchinson, Kansas, seeing some heavy storms. McPeterson is up here. We've now seen an extension into that new warning as well. So again, a couple of different areas. This line of thunderstorms is starting to develop and will continue to get better organized, and it will push further towards the south and east and eventually move into our viewing area in the next several hours. And so we're starting to see that line that's beginning to develop. And then here's the kind of trajectory that we're going to have on that line, likely getting into the Kansas City area around 9 p.m. based on what it looks like. Then it'll be kind of in this area around 10, likely closing in on Nevada around 11 to 12. Same thing for Columbia as well. And then Joplin and then Lake of the Ozarks and Springfield around 1 a.m. is expected. And then again, there is a possibility that a secondary round of thunderstorms could develop around 3 to 5 a.m. in the morning. Now, the thing is, it all depends on how much energy is left in the atmosphere behind this first round of storms. It is possible that this round of thunderstorms stabilizes the atmosphere enough to where we're not able to see any additional thunderstorm development. So round two during the early morning hours on Tuesday might not actually occur, regardless of if it does occur or not, because it's going to be so late in the overnight hours. We will not be live streaming for that second round of severe storms. We will only be live streaming through the first round of storms, which again I'm estimating will depart the viewing area between 12:30 and 1 a.m. Somewhere in that time frame is when that first round will move out of the area. So over the next 5 to 6 hours, we will continue to provide not necessarily continuous coverage, but coverage when needed across the area. All right, we now will go into a brief intermission. We will return in just 2 minutes. This is GWP Live Severe Weather Coverage. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to GWP Live's ongoing severe weather coverage. It is Monday, May 18th, 2026. It is now 6:30 p.m. Central Daylight Time, and we are tracking some of the ongoing hazardous weather here across the country, with a main emphasis on the severe and flood threat here across the state of Missouri and other regions. And so that's what we've mainly been focusing on, but we've also been talking about some ongoing dust storms in Texas, some ongoing wildfires, some winter weather as well, and as well as some dangerous heat and few other things that I can't think of right now that we've been talking about. So we've kind of gone all over the place with the various different hazardous weather here across the country. But again, our main focus is on that severe weather threat that we're going to be dealing with through the overnight hours. Here on your screen, as we were just talking about moments before the intermission, we were talking about the timing of these thunderstorms. We are now starting to see that line of severe storms develop across Kansas. This is where our main severe threat is going to be at. Again, our biggest risk for tonight, as far as threats go, is going to be 75 to 80 mile per hour wind gusts that could cause straight line damaging winds. A few isolated tornadoes will be possible. Overall, though, the hail threat is very low. As we mentioned, our severe weather threat overall is pretty low across the majority of the state of Missouri. Kansas City, the risk is going to be a little bit higher, as those storms will still pack a bit of a punch as they move into the KC metro area. Kansas City, from the Storm Prediction Center, is under that enhanced risk for severe weather. That's a 3 out of 5 on their scale. The rest of the viewing area under a 2 out of 5 on the Storm Prediction Center scale for today. As we mentioned earlier, that severe weather scale goes all the way until 7 a.m. So again, it also goes into the overnight hours as well. So that slight risk for severe storms across our viewing area continues until 7 a.m. on Tuesday morning. But again, the main timing of these storms is going to begin around 8 or 9 o'clock across the Kansas City area. We'll move into our northwestern counties between 9 and 10, and then we'll move towards central Missouri as well as into west central Missouri around 11 to 12, and then we'll exit the viewing area around 1 a.m. So again, that's what we're expecting. Again, there's the possibility of a secondary round of storms during the early morning hours on Tuesday. We would not be live streaming due to how late that's going to be for that second round of storms, but we will continue the live stream as needed for the first round of the storms, which is really going to be where we're going to have that highest risk for severe storms here.
That's right. So a number of major updates on that front, as you mentioned just a few moments ago, Jake. A number of things happening, focusing, of course, on our state, in particular, our sort of regional listening area. What is going on here? But again, a number of things beyond that going on in light of severe weather across the country. Just a ton of different things going on. And you said truly, we've been all over the place tonight. Again, certainly been focusing on Missouri, but who seems to be getting the worst of it, as we mentioned just a little while ago, seems to be Amarillo, Texas. Again, a lot of crazy things going on there, at least a lot of different weather alerts, different warnings in effect for the area. So certainly in Missouri, a number of different severe things going on, and still seem to be, again, very much going on, and not necessarily going away yet. They'll still be with us throughout the night, but certainly could be much worse. Jake?
Yeah, certainly so. But again, there in Amarillo, things are pretty significant here, as we have a fire warning on the northwestern side of the city, and then we've also got a dust storm that's ongoing on the south side around Canyon, Texas. That dust storm warning remains in effect until 7:15 p.m. We're talking about very dangerous visibility because of the ongoing dust across that area. So less than a quarter mile visibility and winds of 40 miles per hour around the Canyon, Texas area. Also, we just got some new information. Another dust storm warning was issued in the panhandle of Oklahoma. So here is that dust storm warning. This goes in effect for uh, Cimarron County in the Panhandle of Oklahoma until 7:45 p.m. At 6:22 p.m., a dust channel was 6 miles south of Campo, or 19 miles north of Boise City, moving south at 10 miles per hour. Hazards include less than a quarter mile visibility and winds in excess of 40 miles per hour. Again, our main threat is going to be a dangerous, life-threatening travel here out of that area. So now we're dealing with the dust storm in the western portion of the panhandle of Oklahoma, right here. That's in the furthest most west, or that's in the westernmost county in Oklahoma. And then we've got another warning across the southern portion of Amarillo. So double the threat, or double the dust storm warnings that are ongoing across the area. So again, we've got the threats going on kind of right in this area, and then that other one newly issued on the far western side of the panhandle in the state of Oklahoma.
That's right, Jake. A couple of different things. Now, we already knew that there was the one dust storm going on across Amarillo, Texas. We see another one, a new dust storm warning in effect in Texas. And Jake, I can't say that I'm terribly familiar with dust storms, things of that nature. We don't exactly have a ton of them here in Missouri. Tell me, how common are these things in Texas?
Yes, I would say that they are somewhat common. I would say probably not to this extreme. You know, we get different blowing dust as Western Texas is a bit of a drier climate. So again, I would say it's somewhat common, but I would say to the extent that we're dealing with right now, it's a little bit less common. I would say the most common location in the United States is Arizona, New Mexico. Sometimes we get quite a few dust storms in that area, sometimes far southeastern California. That's probably the most common area in the United States for dust storms. Not necessarily in West Texas, but it can happen from time to time as we're seeing right now there across that region. So that's something that we're dealing with here. And then again, I want to turn our attention back towards the severe storms that are going on. That's just something else that's quite interesting that we're tracking here this evening. But we've got some ongoing severe storms right now. This is the same line that's going to be moving through Kansas City in a few hours here, currently moving through the Manhattan, Kansas area. We did have a few tornado warnings earlier this evening, but now we have the severe thunderstorm warnings in effect just to the west of Topeka. This goes for we've got Dickinson, Gary, Riley, Morris, and Pottawatomie and Wahamasine counties. No idea of pronunciation on some of these Kansas counties till 6:45 p.m. At 6:32 p.m., a severe thunderstorm was located near St. George, moving east at 40 miles per hour. Hazards include 70-mile-per-hour wind gusts and half-dollar size hail. We do know that trained weather spotters reported 60 to 70-mile-per-hour winds west of Manhattan Airport, or west of the Manhattan Airport at 6:22 p.m. So we've got several locations along Interstate 70 between mile markers 292 and 337 are under this. So a considerable threat tag and an observed tag is with the storm, as again 70-mile-per-hour winds have been confirmed across that area for this warning that we have there in the Manhattan, Kansas area. Then as we go towards the south of that area, just to the northwest of Wichita, we've got another severe thunderstorm warning that remains in effect along this line that is starting to develop. This goes for McPherson, Reno, Sedgwick, Harvey, and Rice, and Kingman and Marion counties until 7:15. At 6:36 p.m., a severe thunderstorm was located along a line extending from 5 miles north of Canton to 5 miles northwest of Halstead to near Arlington, moving east at 45 miles per hour. So, golf ball size hail has been observed with this storm. There is also a 70-mile-per-hour radar indicated threat. There is an observed tag with this storm as well. So again, some pretty significant storms developing there across central Kansas, and those will be moving into western Missouri in just a few hours. So we'll have to continue to track them as they get a little bit closer to the viewing area. We've also seen quite a bit of heavy rainfall with some of these storms. So we've got some active flash flood warnings in effect, and then some additional severe storms that have developed across that region as well, particularly this severe thunderstorm warning that I'm pointing to right now. That warning goes in effect for ping pong ball size hail. That has been observed, so there is an observed tag with that storm. And then the one on the northwest side in this area, that one goes for observed ping pong ball size hail. Then we've got another severe thunderstorm warning on the northeast side of that, and that goes for also ping pong ball observed size hail. And then flash flood warnings in that area. Emergency management has reported flooding as 2 to 3 inches of rainfall have already fallen, and that includes this entire area, including around the Beatrice area there in southeastern Nebraska. So we've got that ongoing, and then we've still got a couple of tornado warnings ongoing as well across the region too. So lots of activity remaining just to the northwest of our area.
That's right, Jake. A number of recent developments on that. Thank you for the update. So, much of that, as you mentioned, across the region, some golf ball sized hail. So, certainly worth taking note of. Golf ball sized hail, decent sized, and that does not mean grab those paddles and go outside. We promise you can wait, stay inside for now. at least don't bother with that at the moment. A couple other things, Jake, you mentioned a moment ago across Kansas, Manhattan, Kansas area, experiencing some very high gusts of wind again across the area kind of surrounding Manhattan, Kansas, a number of difficult to pronounce cities, counties. So if you happen to be in one of those areas, well, be not offended. Don't worry about it. We don't often cover those areas. But if you happen to live in that area, if you're there right now and know how to pronounce it, well, give us a call and let us know how it is correctly pronounced so we can start doing it correctly at 417 448 0819. Please, if we got it wrong, let us know how your city's name is pronounced at 417 448 0819. We would very much appreciate it, Jake.
Yeah, certainly. That would definitely help for accuracy on that. But again, there are some counties that typically are not covered here on GWP's coverage. So that is part of the reason why we may have some mispronunciations here and there with some of the warning or county areas that we've been covering for this evening. All right, so let's go ahead and we're now going to go into, we've got a few different tornado warnings. And so I just want to go ahead and kind of briefly go through a few of these here. We've got one on the far northeastern side of Kansas, and I just got information that that storm will be expiring and it has been replaced with a severe thunderstorm warning. And that warning now goes until 7:15 for Nemea County. 60-mile-per-hour winds, quarter-size hail are going to be possible. Again, we did have a tornado warning, so still something that you'll want to watch, but again, not really anything when we look at velocity on that storm. So that's good. Let's look at a few other storms that we've got just a little bit further to the north. Southeastern Nebraska under a tornado warning for Nemea and Richardson counties in Nebraska until 7:15. And so radar indicated threat. Let's go to velocities on that. And so yeah, I would say a little bit of rotation around Schubert is where it looks like we have some rotation in there. Let's see if we can get a better scan from one of the nearby radars. And yeah, we definitely have some rotation in there, just to the northeast of Schubert, south of Nemea, it looks like. And so again, that's west of Interstate 29. So a little bit of rotation in there. Also seeing a bit of rotation right in here around Dawson as well, just outside of that warned area. So we've got that. Flash flood warning just in northwestern Missouri to the east of that area. We've already seen quite a few inches of rainfall out of that. No reports of flooding out of that area, but certainly something that you want to be watching out for. And let's see here, we've got another pretty strong storm just to the southeast of Omaha. We're looking at ping pong ball size hail out of that storm. And then we've got a few other warnings a little bit further to the south and east here. Trying to get the best look here at the radar on these two. One of those for northern Missouri goes for Gentry and Nordaway and Worth counties until 7:15. There is also the possibility within this tornado warning of golf ball size hail. And so right there on that northern edge close to the Missouri-Iowa border, we're looking at that. And if we go over to the velocities, nothing too strong, but a little bit of rotation right in there just to the northeast of Maryville. And then we have another tornado warning to the north of that in southern Iowa. That tornado warning goes for Ringgold and Taylor counties. That's from the National Weather Service in Des Moines. And that goes for radar indicator rotation. So the good news is, out of all the tornado warnings that we have right now, none of them have a confirmed tornado. But I will say we have a pretty decent rotation with this storm right here. Just to the northwest of Block 10 in southern Iowa. So this storm very well could be on the ground right now. Pretty strong rotation, and then again, a weaker, more broad rotation northeast of Maryville in northwestern Missouri. So a couple of tornado warnings, one of them in Iowa that does look like there could be a tornado on the ground with that storm.
Absolutely. So, a couple of different rotations we are monitoring across the region where these warnings are in effect. A couple now on your screen, if you'll direct your attention within the yellow circles. And you mentioned, Jake, a couple of these, if I understood correctly, the northernmost circle on your screen, that yellow circle is sort of the more concerning rotation at this point, correct?
Yes, that appears to be the strongest rotation. It's a little bit tighter, which you might think, okay, a little bit smaller, a little bit tighter, that means likely not as much of a tornado. But if the rotation is tighter, that likely indicates that it's a little bit more organized. And so that's the reason why it appears that that one might actually be the more dangerous one. And so again, I mean, you need to take shelter if you're under these warnings regardless. But if I had to guess, it looks like that we're more likely to have a tornado out of that particular storm than we are this one here. And so let's see, we actually just had a new scan of the radar that came into us, and so not a whole lot of change with that. But yeah, so again, just continue to watch this here as again we are dealing with a couple of rotations, couple of tornado warnings there in the northern part of the state of Missouri and into Iowa. And again, both of those we're going to continue to monitor closely. But again, that's really what we're dealing with. So again, some pretty significant storms have developed across Kansas, Nebraska, Missouri, and Iowa, and will continue to get closer and closer as we go through the evening hours. And that's why we'll continue to stay here on GWP's live severe weather coverage. But I will go ahead and tell you that there will be a brief hour to 2 hours where we won't be live on the air, and so that'll be before the storms move into the viewing area, and then we will resume the live stream after about a 1 to 2 hour break when the storms start in Kansas City. So there will be about a 1 to 2 hour break in between uh, these live streams.
That's right, and you'll have to stay tuned throughout that, through much of the severe weather, throughout the night. You do not want to miss that here on GWP Live, Jake.
Yes, and so we are going to go ahead and move into a brief intermission. We will return here around 6:52 p.m. and then we will give kind of our final statements at 6:52 and then we'll wrap up this live stream at 7 p.m. So that's what the plan is, but again, we're going to go into a brief intermission. This is GWP Live Severe Weather Coverage. We'll be back at 6:52. And so we are back here on GWP Live's ongoing severe weather coverage. It is now 6:52 p.m. Central Daylight Time. Here it is May 18th, 2026. And again, we will be ending this live stream here at the top of the hour. 7 p.m. is when we will be ending things. But that will not be it for us this evening, as our big round of severe storms will be moving through the viewing area in a couple of hours. And so whenever that does happen, which we're estimating will start around 9 p.m., maybe just a little bit earlier, sometime in there, that is when we will start up our next live stream, our third live stream for today, and we will track out that first round of storms as it begins to move through the area. We are estimating that that round of storms will move out of the area by about 12 or 1 a.m., and so then that'll be the end of our live streaming for this round of severe weather. But again, after we end our live stream, we do want to remind you that it's a really great idea to have a way to get those weather alerts. You can use the different weather radios that you have. The NOAA weather radios are a really good way. Of course, the wireless emergency alerts on your phone. That's always a really great way to get weather alerts in the middle of the night, as long as you have your phone on and as long as you have your weather radios on. So if you have both of those working, then everything should be good. You'll be able to get those life-saving weather alerts that you need in the middle of the night. Again, I do not recommend going entirely off of a tornado siren, because tornado sirens were not made to be heard in the middle of the night when you're asleep. They were not made to wake you up. That's not what tornado sirens were made for. Tornado sirens were made to warn people that were outside. That was their purpose, and so it's not recommended that you rely on a tornado siren to wake you up in the middle of the night. If you live right outside one, like one's right outside your window, then maybe that's something that works, but for the majority of the population, tornado sirens are only going to help keep you safe if you're outside. Most of the time, they're not really going to help you if you are asleep, and so that is where those life-saving weather emergency alerts that come through on your phone that are government issued, that's where that comes in handy. And then again, you can also get those alerts from NOAA weather radios as well. Those are also very helpful. If you put them on the alarm setting, then you can also get waken up for those. And then if you're really extreme, then you may just want to sleep in your safe place. But again, something that's less extreme, more feasible, is to have a way to get those weather alerts in the middle of the night. We'll go ahead and we'll show you currently what we're dealing with some of the different storms that are moving through central Kansas. A couple of severe thunderstorm warnings. Again, these will continue to make their way further towards the south and east here, and will make their way into the state of Missouri during the late evening and overnight hours. And so it is for that reason that a tornado watch was issued for our northwestern counties, including Kansas City, Harrisonville, Warrensburg, and Sedalia, until 1 a.m. across that region. And so that's why we have those tornado watches that remain in effect, because again, we've already seen that line of storms that is starting to develop across central and eastern Kansas. We've got ongoing severe thunderstorm warnings across the Hutchinson area, Manhattan, just to the northwest of Topeka under those ongoing warnings. We also still have some tornado warnings across southeastern Nebraska, northwestern Missouri, and southwestern Iowa, as additional storms have continued to develop across that region. If we currently look at the Storm Prediction Center's severe weather outlook, we do have that moderate risk for severe weather today across central and northeastern Kansas, southeastern Nebraska, southwestern Iowa, and northwestern Missouri. So that's that moderate risk for severe weather. That's a 4 out of 5 on the Storm Prediction Center scale. And so again, a moderate risk for severe weather across that area. Kansas City, a little bit of a lower risk. So once these storms make their way further to the south and east into our viewing area, they are going to start to weaken a little bit. But we could still be looking at some pretty significant impacts once they move through here. The severe weather risk is going to be a little bit lower, but it is still going to be a risk. We are in the yellow for most of us, that slight risk. That's a 2 out of 5 on the SPC scale. Kansas City is in a 3 out of 5, an enhanced risk. Tornadoes are going to be a really big concern across Kansas. We've already seen that at today, as we have the risk of EF3 tornadoes or stronger. Across our northwestern counties, including Kansas City, we have the hatched area for EF2 tornadoes or stronger possible, and a low to medium tornado risk is expected across most of our viewing area through the overnight hours. Wind is going to be our biggest concern. The majority of the viewing area is under the hatched area for wind. That means that 75-mile-per-hour winds or greater is going to be possible. For the hail threat, Kansas City is under the risk of lime-sized hail or greater, but overall, our hail threat is mainly going to be across Kansas, Nebraska, and Iowa. In our viewing area, our main threat is going to be wind and tornadoes. Hail threat is going to be a little bit on the lower side. Something else that we've been dealing with today has been some flooding. We do still have some flash flood warnings that remain in effect along US 54 around the Lake of the Ozarks region. We've already seen reported flash flooding by law enforcement across this area. Between 2 to 4 inches of rainfall have fallen, with some isolated totals a little bit higher than that. These flash flood warnings remain in effect until 8 p.m. as ongoing flooding is going to be possible. From the Weather Prediction Center, we are under that moderate risk for flooding. That's a 3 out of 4 on the Weather Prediction Center scale for flooding. So Kansas City, Joplin, Springfield, Rolla, really most of our viewing area, including Nevada, is under that 3 out of 4 risk for flooding, that moderate risk for flooding. This is the highest risk for flooding that we've had so far this year. Jefferson City and Columbia, we are under a little bit of a lower risk, but still dealing with a decent risk for flooding. Again, our main threat is going to be along and north of Interstate 44. We do still have that flood watch across the counties highlighted in green, including Nevada, Kansas City, Warsaw, Osage Beach, Lebanon, Jefferson City, and Columbia. Some areas could be looking at 1 to 3 inches of rainfall, with isolated totals of around 4 inches of rain are going to be possible. So we're dealing with a flood risk, we're dealing with a severe weather risk as well. Let's go ahead and time out those storms as we look here at the future track. So starting out, here's right now, 7 p.m. Storms begin to move into the Kansas City area between 9 and 10 o'clock, moves into our western and central counties around 11 or 12 a.m., and then it will start to move out around 1 or 2 a.m., and depending on how much energy there is left in the atmosphere, it is possible that a second round of thunderstorms may develop across southeastern Kansas and move into southwestern Missouri during the early morning hours on Tuesday. Overall, our severe weather risk is going to be a lot higher for that first round that we're going to see this evening, but we will be looking at a little bit of a severe risk with that overnight early morning threat for your Tuesday morning. Once that second round moves out, then our severe weather threat will be over, the cold front will move in, and much cooler temperatures are going to be expected behind that cold front. The last thing that I will say for this evening is when it comes to our severe weather threat is, again, if the atmosphere does not recover from the first round of storms, it is possible that we do not see a second round of storms. Regardless, we will not be doing any coverage on the second round of storms. The severe weather risk is going to be a little bit lower, and it's also going to be an early morning threat, and so that's part of the reason that we will not be live streaming for the second round of severe storms. So if those storms do develop, which we think they might during the early Tuesday morning hours, then you'll want to have your phones on when we're not live streaming so that you can get those life-saving weather wireless emergency alerts that we have been talking about here on GWP during our live stream. The last thing we're going to mention overall is that we do have also a fire threat that we've been tracking throughout the course of this live stream. 3 out of 3 on the Storm Prediction Center scale. Again, that's as high as a threat as we can have for fires across the panhandles of Texas and Oklahoma. That has led to a fire warning across the Amarillo area. A dust storm warning has also been issued for Canyon, Texas, on the south side of Amarillo, as we're dealing with less than a quarter-mile visibility leading to some hazardous travel. Just another one of the impacts that we've been dealing with out of this storm system. All right, well, that is it for this particular live stream. We will see you back here later this evening, if necessary, for another severe weather live stream. But again, that is it for now here. This has been GWP Live's severe weather coverage.